In America, there was the Mustang, a cheap, stylish coupe that let ordinary people feel like film stars. It sold in the millions and started a revolution. And across the ocean, Europe watched, and Europe wanted one of its own. So Ford made a promise. A long, low, beautiful coupe, priced so almost anyone could reach it. With a range of engines so wide it could be a gentle shopping car or a roaring V6 bruiser, they even hired one of the men who designed the Mustang to shape it. And they wrapped the whole thing in the greatest car slogan ever written, "The car you always promised yourself." This is the story of the Ford Capri, Europe's Mustang, and for a while the coolest car on the continent. To understand the Capri, you first have to understand the Mustang. In 1964, Ford of America had cracked a magic formula. Take the cheap, boring mechanical parts from an ordinary family saloon, hide them under a gorgeous body with a long bonnet and a short tail, then offer a huge list of engines and options so every buyer could build their own. The result was affordable, desirable, and wildly profitable. The Mustang sold 1 million cars faster than almost anything in history. And Ford of Europe looked at that success and asked a simple question. Why not do exactly the same thing over here? The project began in the mid-1960s under a code name, Colt. But that name couldn't be used. Mitsubishi had already taken it. So, a new name was chosen, Capri. Underneath, it borrowed the humble mechanical parts of the Ford Cortina, an ordinary family saloon, just as the Mustang had used ordinary parts. But on top went something special. The styling was led by an American designer named Philip Clark, and Clark had form. He had been one of the designers on the original Mustang. He is even credited with creating that famous running horse badge. So the man who helped shape America's Mustang now shaped Europe's answer to it. The Capri was revealed in early 1969 at the Brussels Motor Show. It was long, sleek, and looked far more expensive than it was. It had a low roof, a long bonnet, and a fastback tail. It looked fast, standing still. It looked like money. But underneath, it was pure, cheap, dependable Ford. And that was exactly the point. Ford could build it in huge numbers, sell it at a price ordinary people could reach, and still make a healthy profit. It arrived with that unforgettable promise. The car you always promised yourself? Here was the genius of the Capri. It was not one car. It was a dozen cars wearing the same beautiful suit. At the bottom, a modest 1.3-liter engine. Cheap to buy, cheap to run. A car for a young couple's first taste of style. Then you could climb the ladder. Bigger fours. Then the smooth 6-cylinder engines. And at the top, the mighty 3-liter S6 V6, around 140 horsepower and a deep, hard-charging growl. The same shape that sat outside a modest terraced house could also be a genuine performance car. And then there were the special ones. In Germany, Ford built the RS 2600 with fuel injection aimed straight at the racetrack. In Britain, the rare RS 3100, a homologation special, with only around 250 made. One body, a whole world of choices. And that was the masterstroke. A young driver could start with the cheapest, smallest engine and simply enjoy the looks. Then, a few years later, trade up to a faster one. Same shape, more muscle. The Capri grew with you. It could be a first car, or a dream car, or both. It meant everyone, from a nervous teenager to a hardened enthusiast, could promise themselves a Capri. But the Capri didn't just look fast. On the track, it became a monster. In the early 1970s, Ford took the Capri touring car racing across Europe. The works cars, based on that injected RS 2600, were prepared in Cologne with help from Cosworth. And they were devastating. In 1971, Dieter Glemser took the European touring car title in a Capri. In 1972, Jochen Mass did it again. That season, the Capri utterly dominated. It filled the top of the standings. Capri after Capri, crossing the line at the front. Ford had taken a cheap coupe built on shopping car parts and turned it into a giant killer. On circuits all across Europe, the sight of a works Capri in your mirrors meant you were about to be beaten. For a couple of glorious years, the Ford Capri was the car to beat in European touring cars. Europe's Mustang wasn't just a pretty face, it was a champion. But glory never lasts, and here we have to be honest. Because a rival was coming, and it had wings. In the middle of 1973, BMW struck back. They homologated a monster, the 3.2-liter CSL. Covered in wild aerodynamic wings and spoilers, it earned a nickname, the Batmobile. And the Batmobile overturned the Capri's dominance. Ford fought hard. They built the RS 3100 and handed its engine to Cosworth. Cosworth were wizards, the same company that would go on to dominate Formula One. They took the Capri's humble V6 and transformed it, with a new 16-valve head, into a screaming race engine. well over 400 horsepower, from a block that started life in a family car. It was a heroic effort. On its day, the RS 3100 was ferociously fast. But the tide had turned. From 1973 onward, it was BMW that ruled European touring cars for years. So let's tell it straight. The Capri ruled first in 71 and 72. Then BMW's Batmobile arrived and struck back and won the longer war. It was one of the great rivalries in racing, and the Capri fired the first shots. Later, in the hands of the Zaxbyt team, the Capri returned as a wild turbocharged silhouette racer. Wide, low, and making over 500 horsepower, a monster to close the decade. Look at those Zaxbyt cars and you can barely see the road car underneath. Vast box arches, a huge front splitter, a towering rear wing, a tiny turbocharged engine screaming out numbers the original designers could never have imagined. It was the Capri taken to its absolute extreme, from a 1.3-liter shopping car to a 500-horsepower fire-breathing racer. No other car of its era stretched across such an enormous range. That was the secret of the Capri. It could be whatever you needed it to be. The Capri didn't stand still. Over its life, it grew through 3 generations. The first cars from 1969 had a fixed boot lid like a traditional coupe. Then, in 1974 came the second generation, and with it a big practical change. A proper hatchback tailgate that lifted up to swallow luggage. Suddenly, the beautiful coupe was useful too. The third generation, from 1978, added 4 round headlamps and a sharper, sportier face. And it brought the definitive fast Capri. The 2.8 injection, a fuel-injected V6 making around 160 horsepower. For many fans, that later injected Capri is the one to have. There were wilder versions still. In South Africa, a tuner dropped a 5-liter American V8 into the Capri and called it the Piranha. And in Britain, the Ford Capri Turbo, hand-built in tiny numbers, pushed past 200 horsepower. One simple, cheap shape, stretched all the way from a shopping car to a turbocharged bruiser. On the road, though, the Capri became something even bigger than a race car. It became a cultural icon. Over its life, Ford built nearly 1.9 million of them. The 1 millionth rolled out in 1973. And crucially, most were bought by private buyers with their own money. Not fleets, not company car lists. Real people choosing to promise themselves one. It became the dream car of working Britain. Think about who it was for. It wasn't for the rich. They had their Jaguars and their Mercedes. The Capri was for the young mechanic, the traveling salesman, the factory worker who wanted a taste of glamour. For the price of a sensible saloon, you could have something that looked like it belonged to a film star. That was the promise, and a generation believed it. And television made it a legend. In the professionals, the tough guys Bodie and Doyle chased villains in their Caprice. In Minder, Terry McCann drove a white one. It was the car of cops and wide boys, of heroes and chancers. It was so desirable that it became one of the most stolen cars in Britain. Even the thieves, it seems, had promised themselves a Capri. But the world was changing again. By the mid-1980s, a new kind of car had taken over. The hot hatchback. Small, practical, fast, and cheap. Cars like the Golf GTI and Ford's own quick escorts. Suddenly, a cheap rear-drive coupe felt old-fashioned. Sales fell away across Europe. In the end, the Capri became a British-only car, kept alive for its loyal home fans. The very last one was built in December 1986 at Cologne. The final special edition was painted a deep, dark green and called the 280 Brooklands. It was meant to be a run of 500. But when Ford counted, it found it had 1,038 body shells left. So it built 1,038 and stopped. And with that, after nearly 2 million cars, the Capri was over. And there is a strange final twist to this story. Decades later, in 2024, Ford brought the name back. A brand new car wearing the Capri badge. But this new Capri is an electric family crossover. Tall, heavy, and built on a Volkswagen platform. No long bonnet, no cheap rear-drive coupe, no screaming V6. For many fans of the original, it felt like a betrayal. A beloved name, borrowed for something completely different. Whatever you think of it, one thing is clear. The Capri that people fell in love with was the one from 1969 to 1986. The one you always promised yourself. There was never a true replacement. Ford pointed at other coupes over the years, but none of them was the Capri. None of them had that same magic, a film star body on a family car budget. And that is the whole point. The Capri was never the fastest, or the most expensive, or the most sophisticated. It was something better. It was attainable. It let a whole generation of ordinary people own a slice of the dream. Just like the Mustang did in America. Europe wanted its own Mustang. And for 18 glorious years, Ford gave it exactly that. The Ford Capri, the car you always promised yourself,